What's nice is we keep adding programs, and a brand new show coming to BYU Radio starting August 2nd from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern. It's called Behind the Mic with Greg Wrubell. August 2nd, 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, a weekly show. We're very excited to add that to the family of BYU radio shows. And now joining us is that man, Greg Wrubell. Greg, we're very excited about this Behind the Mic show. What can you tell us about it?
Look where I've set myself up, behind the mic.
Yes!
In front of the
yeah. Yeah, we're going to be starting 2 weeks from tonight. Yeah, so on BYU Radio, Sports Nation will air from 5 to 6 Mountain, 7 to 8 Eastern, and then I'll take the air live behind the mic with Greg Wrubell right at 8 o'clock, right after you guys, 6 o'clock Mountain. And it'll be an hour of BYU sports conversation. I hope to have, working on this, hoping to have a BYUtv sports personality join me for the opening segment of every week's show.
He's open.
Yeah, I want a lot of David Nixon, a lot of Brian Logan. I hope to start the show each week with one of you guys, somebody from BYUtv Sports, kind of bat around what's current, what's going on, what just happened, what's about to happen, and then launch into two what I might call kind of feature-length interviews with a current BYU sports personality, and then someone from the past in our Catching Up with the Cougars segment. And the first couple shows are lined up, some good people, and I think fans will enjoy it. Yeah.
You know, Chad Lewis is in the mix after post-Ghana.
Yeah, we're going to talk about his trip to Africa and what then went down with Ziggy there. And, of course, when you bring Chad on, there's no shortage of topics. I mean, he's done it all, from being, one of BYU's legendary tight ends to helping a team to the Super Bowl to all the stuff, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. He's done so many different things. He'll be one of our early guests. Tom Homo, I think, has a really cool story that maybe not everybody knows about his path from where he was growing up to now the BYU AD. He'll be an early guest as well. We're going to hit all the different sports. We're going to hit pretty much everything on campus that has made news from a sporting sense. We'll kind of touch all those different areas. I'm pumped about it.
Very cool. Play-by-play expert, and now the voice of Behind the Mic with Greg Wrubell, starting August 2nd, 8 to 9 Eastern on BYU Radio, a new weekly show. Greg Wrubell is with us in Studio B. We talked about BYU finding success against the 5 teams that we have dubbed the Furious Five, and specifically, which defensive group, position group, do you feel like has to be there for BYU to have great success? I don't know what you're going to define success as, maybe a winning record, winning 3 of those 5, but how will BYU be successful against the Furious Five from a position group defensively?
Well, I think we all know what to expect from the linebackers and how good they're going to be. Very experienced, top-line talent with the big 3. I think we expect the secondary, having 2 freshman corners last year, played well and are now sophomore corners with a ton of potential, and they're deep there. I think we think that the back 7 is in a pretty good spot. The defensive line is the least experienced group on defense, and the most might be expected or needed from them. When you play the P5s, it's invariably run and stop the run. And if it's a trench game, as they almost always are against the big boys, Wisconsin in particular, LSU, I think the defensive line will have to be among the strongest groups to emerge. And again, it is the word emerge because they are the least experienced. Now, I say least experienced, but most populous in terms of number of guys. 23, 24 guys on the roster right now are defensive linemen. That's a huge number, and Coach E is going to use a ton of them. And so I'll just focus on defensive line and say when you play P5s and it's a trench game, you got to be good running it and stopping it, and that's where I hope BYU's D-line to really emerge.
Only 7 sacks returning from that group. We lost some, Tautu and Longy were a big loss in that regard, but there's some good young talent there. The past couple of years, and maybe it's been a while, there's almost been this, I've called it this excuse that I'm kind of tired of, which is, well, they eat up blocks and let the linebackers make plays. You still want the D-line to get some sacks, and Corbin Kafusi, and Sione Takitaki, Trajan Peely, these are guys who can get sacks.
Playmaking guys from the edge. They had 29 sacks last year. Not a bad number. Again, defensive stats were only kept from 2000 onward. From then till now, that's the 5th best single-season number. And again, that incorporates every position group, not just the D-line. 29 sacks isn't a bad number. Of course, it was 40 the year before, so you see a drop. It's still 69 sacks over the last 2 seasons with 2 different defensive coordinators. That's a pretty good result. I like the stat havoc rate. Havoc rate it incorporates tackles for loss, which of course includes sacks. It incorporates tackles for loss, passes defended, that's broken up and picked, and fumbles recovered. Okay, so you combine those 3 stats, you get havoc rate. Okay, and that's basically how disruptive is your defense. Well, last year, first year with Elisa Tuiaki, BYU was 33rd nationally in havoc rate. That's a good number. But front 7, 14th. So from the front seven alone last year, they were 14th nationally in havoc rate. That is, the D-line and linebackers were making plays.
And BYU lost 4 games by a combined 8 points.
Maybe I've undervalued BYU's quarterback pressure because I felt like BYU has not been getting maybe enough pressure on the quarterback. This led to high completion percentage for opposing quarterbacks and whatnot.
Which is why I think we have to look beyond sacks for how much are you disrupting a team's offense. It's really reflected in those 3 areas. Are you making plays that disrupt the opposing team or take them off schedule? It's all about, offensive football is all about staying on schedule. Can you keep your down and distance manageable? Can you keep the chains moving? If you take a team off schedule, you're doing your job. And again, first year, defensive coordinator Elisa Tuiaki got really impressive results, and again, particularly front seven. Yes, you lose some NFL talent from that front seven, but I think the numbers are there and the talent is there in that front seven again.
August 26th, BYU and Portland State to open up the 2017 college football season, but the first real test in those Furious 5 comes against, of course, the powerhouse LSU. So just for fun, Greg, true or false, BYU's defensive line, that defensive front seven, can limit a guy like Darius Geist to under 100 yards rushing?
You know, predictions aren't really my wheelhouse in my job. I get a little hesitant sometimes to lay it on the line in terms of saying this will or will not happen, because in the course of my job, I kind of have to let things happen. But whether they do or don't, they can based on last year's numbers. They played 13 games last year. 6 teams got to 100 yards or more as a team. Only 3 had 100-yard rushers in a game. So in 10 of 13 games last year, BYU kept an opponent's rusher under 100. So that shows they have the ability to, or they had the ability to do it. Now, who are the guys that got 100 yards or more on BYU last year? Well, Jeremy McNichols, Boise State, top 20 running back last year. Kareem Hunt, Toledo, top 20 NFL, top 20 college running back last year. Nick Wilson, 100 yards or more in his first 2 games. Then he was hurt, Arizona back now, and then missed most of the rest of the year. So we really couldn't tell on him. So those were good backs that got good yards, and yet BYU won 2 of those 3 games. So they can still allow the number and get the win. Darius Geist averaged 117 a game last year, averaged 8 yards per carry as the second guy, realizing Fournette only played 7 games. Geist was really the main man by the end of the year. So he may get his yards because he's that good. I mean, it won't be a failure if Darius Geist runs for 100. He averages 8 yards a carry. You give him 15 carries, and there he is if he keeps that number. That said, BYU can allow some yards and still win a game as they showed last year. But there was a stretch last year, and we're talking P5 teams. Michigan State didn't get 100 as a team. UCLA didn't get 100 as a team. So, again, I thought BYU as a trench team showed well last year in the first year under Coach E.
When you look at, we're 1 week away from players reporting to fall camp.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about questions, what we think we know and whatnot. What's one of your biggest question marks for this BYU football team going into fall camp?
Well, and I hate to have the question kind of reflect a potential negative, but how healthy can BYU stay at its most key spots going into game 1? And really game 2, because you hope to be healthy through the first 2 weeks. It seems that invariably a camp comes around, and it's just the nature of the game, especially with a longer time on the field now. You're starting in late July. I just hope and pray that BYU can stay, injury-free at the most key positions on the field, so the depth isn't really affected. I want BYU to be deep and healthy when games 1 and 2 roll around. So that to me is always the question is how much good fortune can BYU have from a health standpoint and get through camp with the guys they need to be in the spots they need. Of course, the coaches will always say next man up mentality, but I think the question has to be, can they be who they want to be heading into the season, and health is a big part of that. Tactically, I want to see how the new tight ends emerge early. MLP moves from a wide out to a tight end spot. Matt Bushman certainly showed well in the spring with Hunter and Tanner back. They're a deeper group than they were, and how much will they be used and how good will they look maybe early in camp? One of the great things about this year's team is there aren't too many really glaring question marks. I know a lot of people like to look at the wide receivers, but I'm confident that Coach Cahoon's group will be a playmaking group. People tend to forget that Micah Simon and Akili Davis were redshirting last year. They're back in the mix, and there's good talent to come back. Jonah Trineman, he's a senior. Let's not forget, he's just had his second season, but it is his senior year. Guys really tend to embrace that as saying, this is my last go-around. So I really don't have as many questions as maybe others might do about wide receiver. I'm pumped about the group.
BYU play-by-play man, radio voice of the Cougars, Greg Wrubell, with us in Studio B. Your concern about staying healthy through camp is well-founded, at least based on the conversations that I've had with all the BYU football coaches recently. That's the number one thing they brought up is we just have to stay healthy through fall camp, and that is the hope when you go into August 26th.
It is football, and again, invariably, it's just going to happen. You spend 4 weeks on the field, things just come up. Yeah.
Yes. BYU, we're talking about question marks, and we've been asking BYU Sports Nation fans for the past few days to answer some pretty tough questions, starting with this. Who will lead BYU football in rushing yards this season? Because there are a lot of guys that are setting up to contribute in the backfield.
Yeah, and it could be the hardest question to answer because of the number of guys who will be given the opportunity to establish himself and perhaps embrace and occupy a workhorse role. That may or may not be the case with this year's team. Who knows if there will be a definitive every down, he's our go-to guy candidate because of how many people there are that are options. I do think what we have this year is maybe the most versatile group in terms of who might be able to specialize in different aspects of the run game. But I'm as curious as anybody to see what Ula Tolutau does here in his first season off his mission. I know people tend to have visions of Harvey Unga Part 2 kind of thing. Wouldn't it be great if that's who he turns out to be? Let's let him be his own guy right now. But such an intriguing prospect. And certainly Squally's got the most snaps, the most reps, the most scores, the most yards. He's going to be the guy that everyone says, okay, he's kind of candidate number one. And no one will be surprised if Squally emerges as the go-to guy. Certainly not. But I like the fact there are a number of different guys with different skill sets that can make the decision maybe not so clear-cut.
Okay, we do this every time with you. We play the Canadian National Anthem whilst you inform us of a cool thing about Canada.
Now, I can't hear the anthem, but I trust that it's playing. Okay, so I'll trust that it's massaging the ears of our audience.
Indeed.
So, the great comedian Jim Gaffigan said there are two kinds of people who go bowling. Those who really, really love bowling, and those who say, wouldn't it be hysterical if we went bowling? So there's two types of people, okay? Just like that, in Canada, there's two types of bowling. And the only kind of bowling I did before I got to BYU as a kid in the 80s was 5-pin bowling. So in Canada, the big deal there, in Canada, bowling is 5-pin bowling.
What?
And the ball is about the size of a large grapefruit. No holes in it for obvious reasons because it fits in the palm of your hand. So the only bowling I knew about was 5-pin bowling. I'd watch the Flintstones and say, what's Fred Flintstone doing with a ball with holes and why is it so big? Because all I knew was 5-pin bowling. So it fits in the palm of your hand, large grapefruit, and only 5 pins. And a perfect game in 5-pin bowling is $450 because each perfect frame is 15 points because the pins have point values. Head pin 5. The adjacent pins 3, the corner pins 2, 15 points possible. A 12-strike game is $450. A perfect game is $450 in Canada, and every year in the great country of Canada, almost 40 million people. The national bowling governing body only sanctions about 10 to 30 perfect games. It's that hard. There it is, 5-pin bowling, y'all.
I didn't think we could go beyond the anthem with 5-pin bowling.
Sorry, I outran the anthem, didn't I? I outran the anthem.
Not by much. Not by much. It was worth it.
It was worth it.
Again, Ben's got to be in your ears going, get him out, get him out. But anyway, there it is.
Wrap.
5-pin bowling, perfect game, $450.
That's awesome.
The plastic money, the unique time zone in Newfoundland, and
I'm
5-pin
basically
bowling,
we're all going to be Canadian by the end of this, basically.
It's one of my
By the way,
favorite
congratulations, Grandpa Greg, first grandkid. That's very cool.
It is very cool.
Yeah.
I feel like the young, cool grandpa. I'm not yet 50, but
the young, cool grandpa.
Yeah, but yes, our daughter Jocelyn, son-in-law Matt, gave birth to baby Jane on Sunday, right on the due date. By the way, I'm a deadline guy. I'm a very, and she's certainly inherited that from me.
Speaking of deadlines,
yeah.
we're going to break.
Yep.